Hi, I am DJ Ghetto Steve. Welcome to my channel. Welcome back if you have been here before. We are talking to some more homeschoolers, folks that have experience within the Institute in Basic Life Principles, and so we are going to chat. How are you folks doing tonight?
We're doing well.
Yeah.
All things considering.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. So for starters, when you were in school, what did kind of a day in the life look like?
Okay, well, I'll go first. A day in a life. We're very much self-taught. I mean, like self-guided. So, we had a hobby that or not a hobby, but an arts thing that we were really, really into. So we spent a lot of time doing that. So then we would both in the morning and the afternoon, we have our time where we spent working on that art. And then we would have a time where we all kind of get together, kind of like mid-morning, and go over wisdom booklet stuff. And then after that, it was kind of just get your work done whenever you want to get it done,
right,
type of thing.
And you had a crap ton of kids in your family, so
yeah, we had a lot.
That contributed to the self-guided.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Because we had 8+ kids in our family.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
that'll do it. Mm-hmm. I made a meme about funny homeschoolers, and I made it a Venn diagram, and it was triggered by BuzzFeed quizzes. Can wear culottes and play sports, useless Bible knowledge, and experience singing in nursing homes.
Yeah.
That's well, you didn't wear culottes because
Well, yeah.
But yes, I had all three, and if you changed culottes to khakis, that would have been
yeah. Yes.
But yeah, the whole read the chapter and answer the questions at the end, that is like the bane of my existence for education. It drives me bonkers. Like, I recognize that you can learn a certain amount of that on your own. I mean, I was a voracious reader. I learned all sorts of random hyperfixations. It was great, but at the same time, I did not understand chemistry, like at all.
I didn't even. So you're ahead.
I could tell you like what a catalyst was. That's about it, though.
I couldn't tell you that at all.
Well, yeah, because I've been looking at the wisdom booklets, and the way that they cover medicine and science is such a very highlights magazine kind of thing. And so, they'll take this one little thing and they're like, okay, we're going to talk about eyes. They don't talk about, what the different parts of the eye do. They talk about, here's 4 disorders of the eye, and we're going to give them a spiritual component so that way you can apply that to your life. Because what matters is the values and the relationship that you have with God. It's not that you can actually perform any secular tasks.
And even with such a small amount of information that they would give you on a topic, Gothard's claim for the wisdom booklets was that if you did all of the wisdom booklets and the extra assignments that you could pick and choose from, that you would have like the equivalent of an associate's degree, pre-med, pre-law, like all of this science stuff. If you just follow their, and I'm like, no, it didn't really. It obviously the claims were completely unfounded.
Oh yeah,
there was never any study that showed that. You're just pulling it out of thin air.
Like so much, Now, did you guys get into Answers in Genesis, Kent Hovind, anything like that?
Yeah, my family was big in Answers in Genesis and Institute for Creation Research. We didn't hear very much at all about Kent Hovind.
Mm-hmm.
I
Same.
recently learned about him from the Leaving Eden podcast.
Yes.
That's a trip. So yeah, but we had Answers in Genesis. My family supported the Ark Encounter, like building the Ark Encounter. We never actually went and saw it, but sent money for it. And
Mm-hmm. Now, I remember when The Passion came out. I had gotten married just a couple years earlier. My husband and I definitely, like, immediately left the church. And so my parents sent us money to go see The Passion.
No way.
We ended up spending the money to go see a different movie, and then we pirated The Passion so that way we'd be able to tell them what it was about.
There we go.
I'm very glad we did it that way.
2 for 1, right?
Yes. Because, the torture porn, like...
Well, we weren't allowed to see Passion at all because it was too...
Well, first of all, you're not allowed to go to movie theaters.
Sure.
But even once it came out on DVD, like, we still weren't allowed to see it because it was going to be too grotesque, which, I mean, seems like that's a common theme. And it was just, like, there was a lot of tension between, like, it's a good movie and we want to let Hollywood know that Christians want more of this, and the flip side of, we don't want to support Hollywood.
Maybe my sibling, because I was the oldest, so I'm trying to remember if my younger siblings had to see it when it first came out or if they weren't allowed to, and I can't remember, but
it's probably just for the rebellious kid, right?
Yeah, I was the guinea pig, as they have said. So when you, like, did either of you go to college, trade school, anything like that after you graduated?
Yeah, I did higher education, got my bachelor's and my master's.
Very excellent. What did you study?
So I ended up getting a generic bachelor's degree, like a liberal studies degree. It was music, math, writing, kind of a whole bunch of things did it. And then my master's degree is actually from a seminary.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. I find it very interesting. There's a number of deconstructioners that have theology or divinity degrees, and it's really cool to see their take on it, because they're like, yeah, I had this professor that was saying this, and they just bring up some really interesting things that you don't hear in, like, a normal conversation, because most people aren't nerds about that stuff.
Yeah, true story.
Well, it almost helps the deconstruction too, because you can get, if you're at the right school, you can get some level-headed professors who can help separate, like, this is what Jesus said versus this is what Gothard says that Jesus says, which is usually 2 very different things.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I've always credited my philosophy professor at the Christian school that I went to for really kickstarting my deconstruction. He was so focused on making sure that we understood all of these different veins of thought, and he wasn't concerned about, like, oh, well, you need to understand this vein of thought, but from the Christian view. He's like, no. This is what they actually thought. This is what they actually read, and really challenged me to dive into diverse opinions, which is not really something I had access to before then.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I have a bachelor's degree. I did it all remotely with dial-up internet. We visited some different colleges, visited some very, very conservative colleges that would have been, like, the most, IFB approved. But in the end, what my parents decided was, if a girl is to be under her father's authority until she's married, how can that happen when she's miles away out of college? And especially if it's college where you might meet a dude and want to do a whole... So I was kept at home and did everything, got my bachelor's, through an accelerated program online, and my sibling also did all of their college online as well for the same reason.
Awesome. And that's something that I've really enjoyed recently, talking to current homeschoolers that are panicking because they're 16, 17, 18, and they only have third grade math. I have so many resources that I can offer to them. Most of them are free, and the ones that do cost something, there's usually a really low cost way to go about it. So that's stuff that did not exist in the 90s.
Oh no, not at all.
Yeah, like your community college, your dual credit stuff, like Khan Academy, tutoring, all of that kind of stuff is going to be excellent for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, what was dating like? Were you allowed to date? Did you date
No.
anyways?
Oh,
I was not allowed to date, but I was so disinterested in marriage because of the fundy example that was set before me, that I spent basically all of my teens and majority of my 20s praying that God would give me the gift of singleness like Paul in the New Testament, because I saw all of the fundy marriages around me and was like, I don't want that. I don't know if I would survive that. And having the gift of singleness, quote unquote, is the only way for a daughter to be able to avoid marriage, because otherwise you will get, because you have to have that, to use Gothard's terms, your umbrella of protection. So I didn't date actually until I met my now spouse. And that was a whole roller coaster with my family. Because even though he went to seminary, it was a liberal seminary, and we were dating instead of courting. And
which I do have to say, in the real world, it was actually a pretty conservative seminary.
Oh yeah.
Pretty conservative seminary.
It's
the wrong
it's a bell curve,
Exactly.
Yeah. We weren't allowed to date at all. Never really came up. We were super, super sheltered. We didn't really have any activities we did out. We had some friends that we'd hang out with and stuff in some mixed groups, but there was never a time where you could actually talk to somebody who you might be interested in or whatever, if you had some type of maybe crush or something like that, everyone would make fun of you for it, so you just shut it down. So
well, and both of our families had the rule that anywhere you went or anything you did, you had to take a sibling with you. And they also had the rule that you weren't allowed to keep secrets from your parents. And you don't keep secrets for a sibling from the parents. So since you have a sibling with you, even you're not even going to be tempted to secretly date somebody, because your sibling is going to rat you out.
So I would say the first relationship that came about in our family didn't really even start till I was in my 20s. No. I think everyone in my family, now that I think about it, really has only met people, or has only dated people in their 20s, not before then.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of that is purity culture too, because you're not supposed to have all of these feelings, so you avoid whatever it is that gives you those feelings because it's sinful and must flee temptation.
Don't give away pieces of your heart.
Yep.
Don't damage the rose petals and all.
Nobody wants chewed gum.
Right.
Now, when you were younger, did you get to do Awanas or 4-H or anything like that?
I did Awanas for a few years. So my family kind of had a slow trajectory into IBLP. So from age about 6 to 10, we were moving towards IBLP and some of their teaching and standards. So during those years, I was allowed to do Awana. But again, I always had a parent or a sibling with me there, and it was heavily supervised.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think, well, for me, I remember one time going to Awana when I was like maybe 6 or 7 or something like that. But no, I mean, the things that we looked forward to were going to all the conferences, and then we got to do alert cadets,
Mm-hmm.
or the girls got to do pre-excel, or
Vomit.
things
All of
like
the
that.
girls were
And
very
then-
jealous of the guys because the alert cadets seemed like they were the only ones out of the entire ATI crowd that had any fun that week.
Yeah, true. And then also we would do children's institutes, CIs.
Mm-hmm.
Those are things that we did once in a while that we look forward to.
Yeah, I got to attend a couple of those while my parents were doing the basic and advanced seminars as we were getting enrolled into IBLP.
Yeah, it was pretty much like I think with someone in our church would regularly host the basic seminar like once a year at least.
Wow.
So yeah.
It's
I mean, because you're essentially supposed to study the basic and advanced materials as if it's a supplementary guide or text to the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like you go through the basic seminar, now you have these basic principles and you keep going on with your life. It's like you keep going back through the basic seminar and learning new things and asking God for new rhemas, which was Gothard's word for like a scripture verse that would stand out to you or whatever.
As they would say in the Pentecostal church, a word.
Exactly.
God gives you a word.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but rhemas sound more biblical, so.
Well, rhema, like the Greek word for word.
Something like that, yeah.
Yes. I mean, obviously we know that there were really rigorous dress code, modesty standards for women. Were there any matching or similar dress code stuff for guys? Like, did you have to be clean shaven? Could you grow your hair out? Could you wear shorts?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think there were really any for guys that I remember growing up
there
with.
were.
At least that I grew up with.
Okay, sorry.
Yes. I think we weren't really allowed to have long hair, so that was one. And we could wear shorts, we could wear sleeves, we could go shirtless. So for us, at least for us guys, I don't really recall really any rules about dress that we were supposed to follow at all.
Yeah.
So we grew up in different regions. In my region, so when we were enrolling in ATI, my dad had a beard. It was well kept, but it was facial hair, and they denied our application to join ATI because of his beard.
Wow.
And he sent back an appeal on the basis that Jesus would have had a beard and all the disciples would have had a beard, and this is a biblical thing. They denied it again. My theory is Gothard couldn't grow facial hair, so he made a rule against it because he can't be outmanned by anyway. So in order to access all of the great teaching and everything that it was going to do for our family, my dad shaved his beard and we were accepted to ATI. I do remember other rules that they had was no more than one button unbuttoned on a guy's shirt. So Gothard's thing with that was 1 is casual, 2 is seductive, and 3 is gross. That was his rule for buttons. And in our area, none of the guys were ever allowed to have their shirts off. And my family would make rules for like if a roofing company or something came over to do some work on our house, they would like tell the crew, keep your shirts on and no rock music, which made the roofing company happy. So there was that, but it was, and then most of the guys didn't wear shorts unless it was like an athletic event, like when baseball was allowed to wear shorts, which I don't know why you would want to do that baseball, but they did.
Someone pointed out the time when Jim Bob made some of the Duggar boys run a 5K in jeans.
I
I don't know.
would think at very least you would choose khakis. A
You would
lot of the
think,
guys that I
right?
grew up with did khakis for every athletic or like, you know, cleaning or construction or whatever.
Sure.
Khakis.
If you need to move, don't
Yeah.
go with the stiffest thing possible. Were there any different rules for dating between the guys and the girls? Because we know, like, a lot of times the girls have to get, like, dad's approval, and then you can court, and then you need dad's approval again, and then you can get engaged. And, like, were the guys required to, like, prove themselves ready to date or anything like that?
Yes. Yeah. So, speaking from my experience with my wife's family, and then speaking from my own experience seeing my sisters engage with my dad, or my sisters, boyfriends and engage with my dad, there was an extreme amount of hoops that you had to jump through in order to really, get the girl, or however you want to say it.
I mean, some dads would even require like income disclosures, tax forms.
I remember there was a list of probably like 200 questions that my dad would give out and have them answer, and they would spend hours going over that.
Good grief.
Yeah.
I may as well just have him take the Myers-Briggs,
Yeah.
He'll tell you about as much. So, I'm wondering, I have a theory, and so I'm wondering your thoughts on this theory. With the concept of men needing to be clean shaven, women having long hair, etc., I am guessing that it has to do with, like, 99% it's Bill Gothard's preferences. But I think he wraps it up in 2 verses. 1 Corinthians, doth not even nature itself teach you that if a man have long hair, it is a shame to him, but if a woman have long hair, it is a glory to her, for her hair is given for her covering. And then Deuteronomy 2, the women shall not wear that which pertaineth unto a man, neither shall a man put on a woman's garment, for all that do so are an abomination unto the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, exactly. Those were the 2 verses I heard all the time growing up, and my hair was well past my waist. I think also some of it comes out of like the 40s and 50s with like crew cut style, but
yeah, because wasn't it like in the the 60s and 70s, wasn't it like facial hair was kind of more rebellious?
Yeah, it was
thing.
A sign of rebellion, and that's where Gothard made his no facial hair rule.
Yeah, I mean, like, okay, let's be real, like, what, 99.9% of the stuff he thought of and then found somewhere in the Bible to justify it,
Yes. It's almost like he took a Joseph Smith class, but he wasn't as good at world building, so he had to use existing Bible stuff for it.
Exactly.
Yeah, pretty much.
And there was never any allowance for age or culture, like from the youngest to the oldest female, it was long hair. From the youngest to the oldest male, it was a crew cut. There was no allowance for having a fro. There was no allowance for, like little girls who can't take care of long hair. It was one size fits all, or one size fits each of 2 genders.
Correct. Something that I thought was interesting about that was you have the 60s and 70s and it's all hair, like hippies with the long hair, dreads, and like these big scraggly beards and everything. So I can appreciate wanting to like distance yourself a little bit from that and say, no, we're going to have a cultural separation here. But then you wrap it up in this whole like, well, that's immoral. That's pretending to be a woman. That is going against God's design for your unchangeable features. And of course, very, very quickly after all of this gets started, we have the moral majority. And so then we really get that transphobic train a running, and it just kind of sails
Gothard
off into the distance.
Well, and the verse you mentioned from Deuteronomy about an abomination to wear the clothing of the other gender is also where they get the no pants for women rule. And even some families I knew growing up, the girls were not allowed to wear culottes because having an inseam was man's clothing versus women's clothing, even though culottes basically look like a skirt.
Yeah, you
have an inseam.
really can't tell a difference.
Go back to what Jesus would have worn, a dress.
Exactly. Everyone was wearing tunics.
Borrowing from another, career, so to speak. I also had friends who were not allowed to wear red because the color red is the color of a harlot. So a red dress, even though that's woman's attire, it's the harlot's attire. So you stay, and her dad would have to look at her clothing and decide, is this red or is it not? You like burgundy?
Is it pink? Is it orange?
And
yeah, I think. Well, I mean, like I think about like looking at American history of like, okay, like coming out of World War II, we're prosperous. Like, the late 40s, early 50s are the times where just like, oh, America was like super great. And that's, I think that's where Gothard drew all this inspiration from what the, proper family should look like. Because when you think about that age, you got like, the white mom and dad with the kids and the little fence in the yard, and the dad's wearing a suit. Like
everybody's the Andy Griffith Show and the Dick Van Dyke Family, and
well, what's funny is that what brought about that period of prosperity was women getting into the workforce and like taking over the jobs that men were unable to do because they were deployed. It was social programs that took care of people's medical expenses, food, etc. It was a massive tax hike on the upper classes and it fueling these programs for the lower socioeconomic classes. And then we get into the 50s and 60s and we start doing away with those programs. Oh, we don't need them anymore. And then you hit the 80s and everyone's like, end the welfare queen.
Oh, yeah. Well, and even though you have all these IFB churches and IBLP, teachings and stuff that seem like they want you to look like the 40s and 50s family. At the same time, you go to church on Sunday morning and you're going to hear a sermon against Rosie the Riveter. You're going to hear a sermon against taxing the wealthy. You're going to hear a sermon against social programs. Like, not even joking. Specifically, there was a sermon against Rosie the Riveter. And it's like, do you not understand how this fit into history? But you don't, because what you have are the wisdom booklets or Becca or something like that, where it's a very like pre-digested and whitewashed version of history that they just kind of spoon feed you to arrive at their conclusions that this image is great and everything that made the image is bad. And so
well, that's exactly how I phrased it. Earlier today, my first video on the IBLP books premiered, and I was saying that, we've got this system where you have one person, one book, one vein of thought. You are spoon-fed everything that you are supposed to believe, be, and do. And if you try and get something outside of what you're being spoon-fed, it is sinful. It is Satan trying to tempt you out from underneath your umbrella of authority. It is the demonic forces of the world trying to corrupt your mind and produce rebellion against your parents and God and the Bible.
Exactly. Yeah. And if you have rebellion, then bad things are going to happen to you. But also bad things could happen to you from God testing you to make sure that you're really holding on to that teaching that Gothard gave in the seminar.
Correct.
You're always looking over your shoulder.
But by the way, have you taken a look at like the different journals, like the Faith Journal, the Virtue Journal?
No, I have not.
So like different, there's like 4 journals.
No, just 3.
There's just 3 of them?
There were supposed to be 7, but they only ever published 3.
There's 3. So Faith, Knowledge, and virtue, right?
Mm-hmm.
I only went through the faith journal, but it was basically like reading through the Bible, and like writing down your thoughts or whatever. But I remember this section at the end of it was a section talking about going astray, whatever, and it said find one of the things you had to do was find a cult, and then talk about how the founder started out this way, and then it went this way, and how the founder is enshrined now in this. Well,
it was the 5 M's of ministries. It was God chose a man, the man chose men, the men had a ministry, the ministry turned into a machine, and the machine turned into a memorial or something
something
that.
Like
anyway,
that.
A friend of mine actually wrote his essay on Gothard and IBLP of basically like God chose Gothard set up his board, they had this finish and sent it in.
Well, at least
he was on his way out of ATI and IBLP by that point. But another one of the virtue and knowledge journals, one of them was going through Gothard's 49 character qualities and writing a couple paragraph essay about each one of those individually. And another section of it, I want to say, was writing essays about each of the 7 basic principles.
Ah, okay.
Basic seminar. I'm not sure that there was anything with the advanced seminar because these were supposed to be student journals, and the advanced seminar was supposed to be designed primarily for parents because it talked about sex. So none of us were allowed to attend.
Right. I want to talk finances for a little bit here. Now, there are some rules about tithing. If you have not tithed for several years, you still owe God the full amount, and it's like any other debt, you pay it. If a wife wants to tithe, but the husband does not, they should not, because he's the authority. However, if a husband wants to and a wife does not, he can disregard her counsel and they should tithe. Then you also have people on unemployment or disability should tithe, regardless of financial circumstances, because you're supposed to trust, right? And then you can get out of tithing if the money comes from sinful sources, as God does not want ill-gotten gain brought into his house. He carries a curse who engage in it or profit from it. Did you guys get a lot of push when you were like teenagers to start tithing early with your like babysitting money and stuff?
Yeah, even as soon as our first, like when we first had allowances or chore money, and it was partly learning budgeting, but included in that was tithing. So even as young as 5, 6, 7 years old, we were tithing on our chore money in addition to setting aside a certain percentage for spending and savings and stuff.
Right, exactly. And there's a lot of rules about like debt and credit, which mostly boil down to you should never go into debt for any reason whatsoever. I'm not sure what you're supposed to do with surprise medical bills, but yeah, you should never, ever go into
have them, and you're supposed to have faith.
Yeah, you're supposed to trust God. If you have surprise medical bills, then you're doing something wrong.
Yeah, you trust God, and also be part of one of like the Christian medical share places.
That's true.
Which are a complete and utter scam, but that's for another video, another time. But I have multiple people who have been just, completely bankrupt because of them.
Yeah.
But, I will tag it above, but John Oliver did a phenomenal segment about health sharing ministries on his HBO show. Now, I love some of the things that, love, and my therapist thinks I say love and fun in a very weird way. But God chooses some to be poor. No social programs can help the poor because it is a spiritual issue, not a social one. Chastening will only stop when people return to God's principles. So there's this, and I'm not sure how much like predates the welfare queen stuff and how much comes from the welfare queen stuff, but it just feels like has been such a push in the last like 40 years from evangelicals to do nothing to help people and to just like shame them for struggling. And you didn't see this in earlier iterations. Like in my videos about different denominations, the like charitable resources and the way that churches existed in covenantal relationships where they took care of each other, like that was not a thing before, like somewhere in 1970s it seems like it popped up. And it really sucks because that's got to be one of the number one things that pulled me like out of the church. As I had been involved in missions my whole life, and I had seen how very little we actually impacted people's lives and how much we took in order to accomplish that tiny little bit. And it just it disillusioned me to this, we say that we care. We say that we care so much that we're going to risk our lives and go to some unknown place in Africa and tell this uncontacted tribe that has told us to stay away that they need Jesus. But we don't provide resources for unwed moms. We don't provide resources for chronically disabled, elderly, all that good jazz.
You know what it is? Well, no, you know what the start of that was communism, to where, communism became the big bad enemy of the United States. So any type of social program where you have to give your money away to somebody, that's
especially
communism.
Somebody that you didn't personally vet. Like that big thing is like, well, we don't know that these poor people are deserving of it. But then on the flip side, like they want to claim that America is a Christian nation and has such a godly heritage. And it's like, well, right there on the Statue of Liberty, it says, give me your poor, you're tired, once yearning to be free. Like we were here for, Jesus has all the verses about like caring for the widow and the orphan and the foreigner among you. And yet, along comes Gothard and all of the other similar teachings about like, the poor are bad, don't be poor. Also, you can only have one income. Also, your annual enrollment is $700 plus the supplementary materials, plus the annual conference in Knoxville and Sacramento. But also don't be poor.
Also have a large family.
And have a large family. And no medical bills for these delivery. Like there were families that would like scrape together every last penny they had to pay their enrollment fees for the year, like selling plasma and doing, every last little bit that they could. And the kids were chipping in babysitting money and stuff to pay the $700 fee for the wisdom booklets.
Because it feels like it also follows with a growing trend towards ecclesiastical separation and rejecting Christian charity, Christian welcomeness. Like when I was in the 80s, we would go to all these different churches and do our preaching and all that stuff, Joe Rodriguez kind of thing. We'd be in a new Sunday school all the time, and so they would always sing a welcome song. And like everybody was supposed to welcome you and be friends with you because you were the visiting missionary and everything. But in most cases, the kids would all sing the song and then ignore me the whole rest of the time that I was there. And I'm like, where is this, like, why do I want to be part of your congregation? Why do I want to be part of this body of Christ that doesn't even seem to like each other unless you can agree on like a 500-point plan?
Yeah, and Gothard didn't even, like his was not even a church. You were supposed to be part of a local church, but there were so many conflicts between the ATI families and their pastors and the direction their church would be going. Like it was just nonstop conflict.
So you'd form your own house church.
And you'd form your own, or you'd even get like ATI churches where that was supposed to be such a blessing, and there'd be multiple ATI families in the church and be so like-minded. And like there's always always petty squabbles and fights over doctrine and fights over practice and fights over whether or not we help this family because did they do enough to help themselves? You know, are they pulling themselves up by their own bootstraps and we're just here to help them out with the medical bills for their 15th childbirth, or should and could and somehow they have done something extra? Like, there's always so much fighting.
But didn't Gothard like the spiritual is emphasized way over the physical, you know, because, you know, your soul is way more important than your
you can
body
kill the
is.
body, but you don't kill the soul.
Yeah. Don't fear a person who can destroy the body, but fear a person who can destroy the soul. So the soul is emphasized way over the physical. So you have to provide for the spiritual needs of somebody before you can provide for the physical needs of somebody.
Which is why everybody would pay their $700 enrollment fee, because they're taking care of the spiritual need of their family. And, you know, like, skip a few meals if you have to.
Yeah. Well, in the finance tips, you're supposed to be fasting on a regular basis to both reduce your grocery budget and to encourage suffering through hunger, because that's supposed to...
You're going to get a lot of rhemas through fasting, or maybe you're just hypoglycemic. We'll never know. But yeah, fasting, there were fads. Sometimes, you know, Gothard would be on this kick where it was like everybody's supposed to fast every Sunday because that's the Lord's Day, or sometimes it was certain holidays. Sometimes it was giving up, instead of food, maybe you were giving up your favorite music, except for IBLP music, of course, or maybe you were giving up reading the news, like you were fasting from the news, or you were fasting from getting together with friends for a month and stuff like that. But yeah, it was usually food, and it was usually kind of fit into that whole, like, everybody was broke.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, you know, Yom Kippur and Lent, and let's grab them all.
But not Lent, because Lent is evil, because Lent is Catholic. So don't fast during Lent. Don't do Fish Fridays. But maybe you could do, like, beans and rice Thursdays.
I did appreciate how he warns against multi-level marketing and pyramid schemes, but, like, every fundy mom I know is in someone's downline. Every single one of them.
Except I cannot think of an ATI mom who was in multi-level marketing between the years of 1995 and like 2005.
Yeah, I think
they all are now. The ones that weren't then are now. Like, everybody I know is in an MLM. But during that time, MLMs were evil, and also because it involved, like, parties in the evening, or, like, you know, you had to, like, be on, you know, on your social media for a certain amount of time every day. Because of that, it was considered having a job, and so none of the women were allowed to do it.
Nice.
Wouldn't want mom having an evening away from her kids every 2 weeks or something.
Right. No. Couldn't do that. I loved some of the little notes that they had for examples of, like, they had a budget basically of why a wife's salary was a loss in the end. Of course, that included expenditures like because I deserve it expenses. And so I'm like, okay, so yeah, if she's treating herself every day, sure, it's not going to be very helpful. If she's as responsible and fiscally sound as you are with the husband's paycheck, I think you're going to be okay.
Well, and some of it was, like, it included the, like, childcare expenses. Like, well, maybe we should factor in why childcare is not affordable in America and address that issue, instead of being like, well, she can't work outside the house because childcare is too expensive. Some of their stuff is like, you're going to be having takeout every night and you have to hire a maid and you're going to want a bigger house to keep up with the general stuff. And it's like, no, I know a lot of working moms who don't have maids and don't do takeout and they are just fine.
Yeah. My mom went back to work when I was 12, I think. But after that, like, we still had just as many home cooked dinners. Granted, I was cooking most of them. But you know, we made it work without, because we never ate out. Never, never, never. That was way too expensive.
Right.
But yeah, you know, just parentify the older ones. It's fine.
Yeah,
that's how ATI thrives too.
The shame of slothfulness. So there was a little area called Who Failed the Sleep Test in the Bible.
Oh yes, I remember this one. Yes, I remember this one.
Triggered.
Yes.
So like my favorite one, I think, is that a slothful person does not anticipate future needs, and that was precisely my problem. Because of it, I lost the opportunity of a lifetime. Who am I? The unprepared virgin.
Gotta have those lamps trimmed and ready.
Wow. There's so much where I'm going through this book and I'm like writing my notes down and stuff, and I'll look over to my friend and I'm like, okay, I know you're in the middle of the book. I need you to stop. I need to I need to make sure this is not a fever dream that I am reading.
I swear my therapist thinks I'm making half of this stuff up.
So
like, no, it's for reals.
Oh no, totally agree. My therapist is recently started deconstructing, and so her sessions with me are almost like reverse therapy for her to help her along her deconstruction.
Really beneficial here.
And it's really fun because we have such great conversations about it, because, you know, we're obviously in different places. I've been doing this for 20 years. She's new to it, but, you know, there's so much at a basic level where you can talk about the like roots of negative cognitions and positive cognitions that you get through various influences and the things that stick with you. And so identifying like really problematic doctrines that there is no way to accept this doctrine and not have a corresponding negative cognition about yourself. I'm a sinner, therefore I am broken. I can do nothing. I cannot trust myself. I cannot even trust myself to know what I need or to know who I am. None of that. And it's like, how is it such a shocked Pikachu that we're coming out of this and we're like, hi, Mom and Dad, I have trauma.
Yeah, or, you know, people who don't recognize that it was abuse because you're taught not to trust yourself and you don't know what's right for you. And it's like, wait a second, you know, I was being abused for all of those years. Like, I was sexually harassed at work. I had no idea because I had no sex ed. I just knew like, oh, that's uncomfortable.
Right.
But, you know, it was an elder from my church, so he knows better because he's up on the chain of command and with the umbrellas. And so it's probably it was just a bad joke.
Exactly. The thing that really gets me about this and so much of conservative evangelicalism is that there is this laser focus on ensuring obedience, salvation, and purity, but they never do anything to actually protect them from real life predators. You know, you don't know that, you know, yeah, this is uncomfortable, but I don't know that that is a sexual thing necessarily that I should go and tell another adult about. Like, oh, maybe it's fine and I'm just weird and I don't know how to be comfortable with this person.
You can't trust any of your feelings and any of your emotions and any of your gut instinct and intuition, then, you know, when you can't separate what's good and what's bad.
Yeah. And I knew a family that was in IBLP, and the thing that stuck out for me as a kid, going, yeah, they're different than the churches that I go to, because the brothers would tell the sisters that they were being provocative and immodest, and they were causing their brothers to stumble. And I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. You really got to set up a bad framework when incest is such a like prevalent thing. It's planted in their heads, like.
Yeah, if you're lusting after your little sister, like that might be a you problem, not a her problem.
Yeah, it's just so, it's like for me, like I do sporting events. I go to different sporting events and help out, right? And I go to like different, go to boys sporting events, girls sporting events, helping out, and there are people who I know who would disapprove of me going to like a girls sporting event, right? Because of they're wearing athletic clothes, but I'm like there, and I'm just like, but you flip it around, you're just like, why would you think that it's even okay for someone to do that? Like you're in you're
in a professional capacity.
It's just like, why would that thought even come into your mind that it's normal for someone to think like that,
Yeah. It absolutely normalizes the predatory nature of the man, and then the prey nature of the woman.
And that's how Gothard got away with grooming and abusing all of his staff. Yeah, it was, he would pick out these 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old girls at conferences. He had a type. It was, blonde with certain type of curls and, tall but not taller than him.
Right.
And thin. And so he'd have his type, and he would, because he was, again, like higher on the chain of command and part of their umbrella of protection, because it goes, the girl and her mom and her dad, and over the dad, where the pastor would be. Sometimes in the pastor's place, the umbrella would say Gothard. So it's Gothard and then God. Like when he's, grooming them, and they're taught not to trust their instincts, and this is just weird, but it's coming from Gothard, so it must be fine.
Exactly.
That's how he got away with it for 40 years or whatever.
Correct.
It was. Yeah. And still has people defending him.
Right.
Because, how dare we believe 40 women in a lawsuit versus one creepy old dude?
Well, and what's frustrating is that scenario is unfortunately not limited to religious leaders, because we have like Cosby or any of the other male comedians that have, within the last 10 years, we've found out just what creeps they are, and they don't really see accountability from that. They're fine.
And even within ATI, there's no accountability, because pecan thief David Waller sat in the room while Gothard was sexually grooming and harassing a couple of these gals, and did nothing about it. And now he's top dog at ATI. IBLP's replaced Gothard. And some of these women that are in survivor groups that I'm in are like, this person sat in the room and did nothing for me when this was going on. They saw it. They knew what was going on. They did nothing. And now, they take the reins from Gothard and keep on going.
Exactly. So on a more lighthearted note, there is a symbolic meal of Jell-O mold, celery stalks, potatoes, wheat bread, lemon wedge, unleavened bread, because we need more carbs, and steak. Did you guys ever have to actually sit through that late 70s abomination of a meal?
No.
I don't think I have. No.
Was that supposed to be like a Passover, like a Christianized Passover?
No, you would
No.
think, but not at all. It's a list of like sins or whatever. I think it goes over like the 7 principles basically. So like the principle of design, we all have a God designed mold. The principle of authority, we're supposed to stay under God's authority or we become bitter, like celery if you leave it out.
Oh,
The
gotcha.
principle of
Okay.
responsibility, potatoes, they're under the ground, but then they come to light. And
Okay, yeah, I do. I remember like all the analogies for the stuff. I never heard it grouped together as like the symbolic meal or whatever. But yeah, bitter like celery was that was a thing.
yes, I was like, okay, apparently I'm gonna have to try that out next time I'm cooking. Not that I buy celery that often.
No, it'll give you a heart of bitterness. And
Right?
are not supposed to read the men's manual, but the women's dress guidelines are in the men's manual.
Yes. Well, because the man's got to tell you what to wear. You wouldn't
Yeah.
know.
The husband and the dad is supposed to tell you what to wear, so he gets the examples. I'm like, can we be any more misogynistic?
Yeah, no, not really. You got to work really
Yeah.
hard at that.
Yeah. No, not really. No.
I shouldn't have been surprised by this, but I was. There were a couple of like quiz questions and stuff about like labor organizing and if you have a complaint about an employer, will a better benefits package make it better? According to Gothard, that's a no. But in regards to labor organizing, he said Proverbs 22:10, drive out the mocker and out goes strife, quarrels and insults are ended. So was there any other like weird like coworker, employer, employee type rules?
I think the one that I remember, and I think I can't remember if this was a financial seminar or the basic seminar, was going to your boss and ask for their forgiveness for whatever you did, if it was stealing time or stealing something.
Wow.
Yeah, so like time card theft, you had to ask forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
Even like down to the minute. Like if you were
Yeah.
like, you went to lunch, you forgot to clock out, you put your soup in the microwave, you remember, and you go back to clock out. That's what, probably like 2 minutes. You were supposed to ask forgiveness for that. Oh, and Gothard didn't even pay minimum wage.
Mm-mm.
He got around it by having minors, claiming that it was volunteer stuff.
Internships.
He would have managers adjust time cards. If staff had overtime, they would take off the overtime because that was, well, we paid you with pizza to stay late. One of the people on staff that worked for him worked so many hours per week, mandatory by Gothard himself, that he eventually started hallucinating. His dad finally figured out what was going on, went to pick him up, and my friend has no idea. He was like, I just remember waking up on the floor of my room and my dad was there because he had been hallucinating the whole time from lack of sleep and not getting sleep for it. But another one of the big rules I remember, going back to coworkers, was some people call it the Billy Graham rule, but Gothard also harped on it quite a bit, was never having a man and a woman alone together, because you would probably have an affair and all of that kind of stuff. Gothard has a lot of ideas about how people just instantly want to jump in bed with each other.
Yes.
But so women aren't supposed to be in the workplace anyway, because that's not God's design. And then that's how affairs start, because then their boss wants to sleep with the secretary. But since we live in a broken world and women are going to be in the workplace anyway, you had to have
those heathen women in the workplace. And those are the biggest Jezebels that you've got to be careful about.
Exactly. They're going to tempt your wife's going to be home pregnant with number 10 and maybe not looking her best. And you got this hot knee skirt, knee length skirt wearing businesswoman at work, you're automatically going to want to have an affair. So yeah, so not being in a car, don't go out to lunch with just the one-on-one. The exceptions to that would be like an older woman in the church, kind of a retired age, married. She could be like the church secretary.
Sure.
And that would be fine, because I guess
she's not hot.
Gothard was not attracted to older women. He was only attracted to teenagers and 20s, regardless of his age.
Yes.
But yeah, so just a lot of the no one-on-ones. Like if you're having a business meeting, you both meet at Starbucks so that you never have to be alone, and the Starbucks barista can vouch to your wife that you didn't actually do whatever. So
now, something that I found interesting in the authority structure was that there were so many implications about anything that the mom was interested in, anything that the mom was in charge of, the children were going to see as silly or childish, and it was only going to be the things that the dad was concerned with that would actually be seen as respectable and sincere. So I'm finding this weird juxtaposition of this intense focus on you must respect your parents, you must respect the chain of command, but also intrinsically teaching them to disrespect their mothers,
or at very best have less regard for your mother than your father.
We were talking about The Passion, the movie. There's a couple pages in, was it the first volume? Yeah, the first volume, where there is a step-by-step medical description of what happened to Jesus in the Passion. And I was like, wow, this is excessive and extrapolating a lot out of the very limited information that we have. But okay. So again, he was trying his world building out. He just needs to join a couple Z&Z campaigns and he'll be fine.
No, but about that, it's like there's a, I don't know if it connects to that specifically, but there's a part in, I think, the basic where he says, imagine whatever sin you're committing as, Jesus getting whipped or something like that.
Yes. The cat o' nine tails being drugged down his back. That's what happens every time you kiss your boyfriend.
Yeah.
That's what happens every time you have time card theft at work because you forgot to clock out for lunch.
You're driving a nail in Jesus' hand. Yeah.
Ugh. Yeah.
And they wonder why we all ended up in therapy.
Right? I do have to say, the way that Gen X handled the trauma was not the best, but they also didn't have the same resources. The way millennials have handled trauma has been slightly better. The way that Gen Z is handling trauma, like, they've got it built into their slang, and they're all about, like, feeling all the feels on TikTok and then, talking to a therapist 5 years from now.
Yep.
One of the, I was talking to Sarah. Yeah. Was talking to Sarah about the bite model, the kind of the structure of a cult. So the behavior control, information control, thought control, emotional control. And obviously Bill Gothard has got the lockdown on the information control and the thought control. And one of the things that came out of that was we have this myth that you need some sort of training or long-term deep study in order to understand the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, but we've had divinity degrees since the Middle Ages. Like, that was one of the first things you could get a degree in. And that has been a primary component of basically every single denomination out there. The SBC has their seminaries, Presbyterians have their seminaries, the Jesuits have theirs. And so everybody is very focused on ensuring that we have this clergy that are educated and ordained and everything. but then we're feeding all of this stuff to the people that 10, 15 years from now might need to be a pastor, and we're telling them, nah, you don't need any of that. Just repeat this, regurgitate for the next 500 years. It's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's like it's like you're meant to be, study hard, study the Bible hard, meant to let people answer everything. But yeah, no, you can't. But yeah, you can't get a seminary degree or whatever, because that's all been tainted. So you have to.
It's been tainted by humanism.
Yes.
And probably somehow the Catholics. Catholics, and they're behind everything,
It's the Catholics or the Jews,
Exactly.
One or the other.
Yeah, one or the other. It's yeah, honestly, like I think one of the reasons why I went to seminary was because like I had that obsessive thing about, like, okay, I need to know as much as I can of the Bible, so that way, I can answer any question people have.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, once I finish seminary, you find out, like, nobody cares that you have a degree at all.
And maybe you graduated more questions than you started.
Yeah.
Yeah. That I think is the sign of someone who has truly sought education for the purpose of expanding the mind versus needing to reach a predetermined conclusion. Because the ones that go through it with the open minds and whatnot, even if they are still Christian pastors, they are the ones that I can actually have discussions with, and there's not this immediate judgment because I'm outside. And you can actually talk about things and the philosophies behind it, and you get really, really good stuff. And then you get poor Philip. He's gonna end up with the world's most worthless degree from the 20-person college that he's at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, and the thing that Gothard had was that you should have an answer for anyone who asks you, that whole verse from Peter. But it was always Gothard's answers, Gothard's interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it contradicted scripture.
Yeah.
And I would hear people be like, well, but Gothard says, and it's like, as I was kind of working my way out and starting to be like, but Jesus said, and well, but Gothard says, and there was never any space to kind of hold this tension of like, there are some hard questions and things that we may never understand and things that are just hard to grapple with. There was no room for that in IBLP. It would just had all the Gothard manuals, and the answer would be in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Funny? But what it is funny is when people find out when fundies find out that I've gone to seminary, they don't ask me they don't try to debate me about anything with the Bible, anything at all. Like, it's so funny because I'm just like, okay, I'm like prepared for, I can go toe to toe with you, but they're just like, no, like they don't want to go there at all.
Nope, they don't. Not at all. So, talk to me about Alert.
Alert.
Air Land Emergency Resource Team.
Yeah. So, Alert was created as a way for young men to challenge themselves both physically and spiritually by going through this boot camp process. And then they also had the opportunity to go to disaster areas and help people in need by doing whatever work needs to come up. So they have training in firefighting or working at chainsaws, so you could take down cut up down trees, even rescue diving or
EMTs.
Yeah. So I know a couple people who have actually gone through Alert, and they're actually professional rescue personnel or emergency responders.
Very cool. Yeah, I was looking at the website and I couldn't find anything that really spoke to any accreditation or certification. So I
Yeah.
wasn't sure if that was something that just, you'd go through alert, you would learn the stuff, and then you would take the test through a local body or something. I know they
Mhm.
did have diving certification listed, but I couldn't find
Yeah,
anything for like the
they
EMT.
have scuba certification, and you would sit for, or you would test. Um, is it a national test or a statewide? I'm pretty sure it was national. And then I know that you could also do like your state's EMT or paramedic certification.
Mm-hmm.
And was there any search and rescue certification?
I don't think there was. There could have been, but so surprisingly, you could take a lot of this stuff out into the real world.
Mm-hmm.
So you got some people, like Allure was this odd mix of like, it's ATI and it's got some of that. Gothard would have never survived the program. But like, you get some ATI stuff and some cult teaching, and you can get some real douchebags like the Bates kids.
Metacore.
Lesson Bate. Yeah, exactly. But you also get some where, like, maybe it's they're only allowed, a higher education to use that term loosely. And so you get guys who, like, actually have a decent head on their shoulders and are trying to do something with their life because they know that they're about to be a single income family as soon as they find a wife. And so you get some people that turned out decently as far as like rescue diving and EMT paramedics. Are there other ways that you could have gotten those training without the cult? Yes, but if you are raised in a cult and that's your only option, at least you got some training.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. It gives you some sort of vocational tool to use to get something other than a entry-level flipping burgers kind of job.
Yeah, exactly. But all those weren't accessible until after you went through boot camp, which was
right. You had to go through basic training.
Yeah, so the main thing of Alert was their boot camp where you go through, I forget how many weeks, 12 weeks or whatever.
I think so.
And then after that, you had the option if you wanted to stay on, you could, do these things.
There were like 2 more levels.
And there's phase 2 and phase 3.
Yeah. So, but phase 3 was literally boot camp for.
No, phase 1 was boot camp.
Yeah, sorry, phase 1 was boot camp with Christian.
It was
paint on it.
It was Christian boot camp. So, like, in addition to running around and, all night treks through the forest where you live on whatever you can hunt. You also had to like memorize the book of First Peter word for word and be able to quote that at your graduation or in order to graduate and stuff like that. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of like survivor stories about, getting seriously injured while on these 80-mile treks and not receiving appropriate medical care and then having like lifelong issues because this was not taken care of.
Help mitigate that. And they say that you wouldn't get any help in boot camp in the military. And so that's why they don't. But yeah, like, and I've heard stories, like, somebody's a little overweight and like basically their whole battalion's going to make fun of them because they're the lowest runner on whatever. But yeah, at the end of boot camp, there's a 24-hour survival hike. Basically whatever you can find to eat, which is becoming less and less because they do these things every 6 months, I think, at Big Sandy. So like everything that can be eaten has already been
correct. There's no time for it to.
So, like, depending on what season, there may or may not be any, like, berries or mushrooms or even. So, yeah, I know that the 24-hour survival hike is getting.
But wasn't the 24-hour survival hike fasting as well during that hike?
No, it's not fasting. It was whatever you could scrounge up to eat.
Yeah, but
so like the first few could get like small game, and now you might find a handful of mushrooms, you know.
Yeah. So so I think when you talk about alert, like, those are perks for people who had, stayed on for a couple of years, but the main part of alert was this boot camp experience that, I mean, to me, I never went through it, but I would be traumatized going through that process.
Yeah, and phase
completely.
1, you come out with, you don't have any certifications that you come out with.
No.
It doesn't transfer to anything. It won't transfer to the military. It doesn't transfer to pilot school or whatever.
And the cost to attend phase 1 is something like $5,000 or something like that.
Yeah, and if you drop out, you won't get it back. Or if they fail you because of an attitude problem, like there's also that too. They can fail you for being rebellious or having an attitude or having contraband, like rock music CD,
Get caught having a phone call with your girlfriend during the first 12 weeks or whatever.
Exactly.
Probably if you had a girlfriend, you weren't allowed to go.
That's true.
I think a lot of families would ship their quote rebellious kid out to alert to.
It was, you had the people who are trying to do a career like EMT or pilot's license, but then it also served as like the rebellious teen boarding school, like similar to Agape or Hepzibah House type. It was IBLP's version of that.
Yeah, exactly. I was actually reading an article specifically about looking at the comparisons of alert and the troubled teen industry. That will definitely be in the links. It's more than I want to get into at the moment, but I think it's useful information for folks to have. I keep going back and forth on this, and in my charitable description, I am calling it dialectics, to where you have two seemingly opposing concepts being given in harmony. The one that I keep coming back to is the prosperity gospel plus God might make you poor for a reason, and then you've got to get spiritually good, so he will give you riches again, so we're back to prosperity gospel. But then there's you're not supposed to loan money to a Christian brother, but you are supposed to, your surplus will meet their needs, so that in turn their surplus will meet your need. And I am very confused about how that would have played out kind of practically with what you guys saw.
Well, practically it'd be like, well, I can't loan you no money, but I might be able to give it to you as a gift.
Or your excess would be your tithe, or maybe your tithe plus your excess. And then if you're in an ATI church, you're trusting that the pastor and the elder board would perhaps give a gift, again, not a loan, but give a gift to a deserving family. So going back to like maybe medical bills, if that family needed help paying for childbirth and the church leadership really thought that they had actually done everything in their power to do it and just needed a little bit more income at the end, then they get a gift from the excess. But there was a lot, like one of Gothard's favorite people had to be Job, and the whole like Job had everything, and then some combination of God and Satan took it away as a test or a trial and temptation, and then Job got it all back plus extra. Maybe sometimes in this life you get it all back after you've proved your faith through a trial, or maybe you never do, and that's in heaven. That was always really vague, purposely vague.
Yeah, but I think the big thing is like, if you were having some type of problems, like it was because you were either walking in sin or God tested you. Like that wasn't the ideal at all.
No, the ideal was that God would be testing you to show that your faith was so strong. At least that's how I always heard it.
Well, yes, but it was also to show you the error of your ways. But like, because like the basic seminar would promise you like, it wouldn't like flat out promise you wealth or riches or anything like that, but it would basically like you would have the life that you wanted, which would be a comfortable life,
right?
You know, and kids, all these things, and
which is how he got so many followers, because he promised like, if you do all these things, God will bless your family, which included finances, but it also included your children won't rebel. You'll have a happy marriage. You'll have.
So as long as you're doing these things right, but when things start going wrong, it must be because you're doing something wrong.
Yeah, maybe you missed one of the 49 character qualities.
Yeah, and so I think for the most part, it was prosperity gospel in the sense of, if you do this, you'll get what you want. If you don't, you know. And then I think when he was talking about like, you know, being poor, it's like, okay, some people choose intentionally to be that, like missionaries or you know, pastors. Their life is intentionally going to be a poor life. It's not necessarily.
But they're going to have more riches in heaven to make up for it. So
exactly,
as much as Job got, you know, 5 or 10-fold, whatever, after his trial, you know, these pastors and missionaries are going to get that same amount in extra in heaven.
You know, I always resonated hard with the story of Job. I'm pretty sure my churches were similarly obsessed with that story. And I got to a point where when I was struggling with being gay, and I was like, you know, I'm not going to have riches and glory if I actually grow up to be a gay person. So maybe I just shouldn't grow up to be an adult, and I should just, you know, we'll peace out and see God early, and then I'm safe. And it is so depressing to me looking back at that, and to know that I am not the only gay kid who had that thought. And the way that it is completely invalidated because you're outside of God's design. So of course you're depressed. Of course you're anxious. Of course you're confused. And there's just not enough grace to allow that level of nonconformity.
Yeah, that was the thing that struck me when I was going through my deconstruction process, looking through all these materials of just like, okay, I think there is like maybe one time in like the basic seminar where it talks about, okay, you're saved by grace through Jesus. And that was it. You know, where if we're talking about the entirety of Christendom, like, you know, you have these handful of close-handed issues, like the top one being like, you know, you need to accept, you know, you need to follow Jesus as Lord. That's like the number one thing that defines you as a Christian. Yet in IBLP, it's relegated to like one sentence, you know?
Yes.
And then it's all of the stuff. But I mean, the amount of suicidal ideation, self-harm, eating disorders that I saw in ATI and IBLP, mind-blowing. And they would say, oh, the world has all this struggle. And I'm like, no, the percentage in ATI, IBLP, fundamentalism in general was so much higher than I've ever encountered.
Well, you know, they love to tout divorce rates. And over the last, like, 10 years, atheists who have lived together before marriage have the stablest marriages. And that makes them so mad. So mad.
That, like, I mean, I have a lot of funnies that I know that have gotten divorced as they've deconstructed for various reasons. But not even all the fundies have happy marriages, even if they refuse to divorce. And that's what I saw when I was praying for the gift of singleness, was like, I don't want what you're offering, and this is the only example that I have. So please don't make me get married. So I would develop this, like, you know, self-protection mechanism where I was like, I was the good kid. I like towed the line super deep, but I had just a little enough snarkiness that, like, if I sensed that there was maybe a guy in my church that was starting to notice me, I would have just enough of an independent, like, snarky streak to turn him off, because I wasn't going to be the perfect submissive wife.
Yes.
And yeah, there's so little that you can control.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and then you've got Gothard saying that you have to fast all the time. And I saw a lot of people using that as a cover for eating disorders, or, you know, you've got all thousand
Food
layers
insecurity
on you for modesty. So nobody's going to know if you're self-harming. Like, it was such a toxic environment.
Yeah, absolutely.
A bunch of trigger warnings on.
I know.
You know, I'm sorry, but it's like that's the truth of what it's like growing up. Like,
it is, and it's really tough to be an adult and to be, I don't want to say outspoken, but to actually, like, admit, hey, when I was this years old, I was going through this. I really felt like this happened to me. And they will get so completely offended and just, how dare you say anything bad about your upbringing? We did the best that we could. We were making sure that God was the center of your life. And, you know, it's not our fault that you strayed off course. And
it is so hard. And that's why, I mean, that's why I've chosen to be anonymous. And whenever I speak out, it's like, I know that it was well intended. I know that, like, Gothard made all these promises of happy marriage and kids that won't rebel and God blessing your finances and all of this stuff. And my parents bought into that, and it was well intended, our joining ATI, IBLP, Gothard teaching. But, and I mean, I'm not ready to have the conversation with them yet, but maybe someday. What the fuck were you thinking? Like, how did this make sense? How did this seem? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, even some of the Children's Institute songs are still really triggering.
Oh, like, my gosh. Do you remember the Eden, Leaving Eden episode about IBLP, well, IFB kid songs? Because, like, 90% of those were in my churches.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was just, oh my goodness. It was
I was
from memory lane. Like,
so I had it on headphones, right? And my friend is on the other side of the room, and I start doing.
Uh-huh.
And then
she's like, "What are you doing?"
So I can sing half of them in another language, and then IBLP had their whole collection of stuff. And I tell you what, if you were a gay kid growing up in the Children's Institute and sang the 10 Unchangeables song, I am so sorry, because at least a third of that song will not apply to you, and it's probably very hurtful. And I'm like, I mean, the farther you get away from it, the more obvious it is, of course. But it's just like, whew.
I was reading, I'm trying to remember how they structured it, but basically it was the different levels of belief from a psychological standpoint. And, like, 0 to 3 years old was this set of development, and then 3 to 7 was the next one, and then 7 to 12 was the next one. And they talked about the different types of belief that you have in those age groups. And up to age 7, basically whatever someone you trust tells you is the truth, you take it for, you know, God's honest truth. I'm not going to question that. And that's why they harp on have faith like a little child. They do not want you to question. They do not want you to actually think about it. They just want you to apply it.
Right. And if you're 0 to 7 and you do try to have some independence, or, you know, developmentally normal rebellion, putting that in quotes, like, it just gets spanked out of you. Like, they take pride in breaking their child's will.
Yes.
And I'm like, looking back, I'm like, how much of that was just developmentally normal and nobody had any idea because thinking was all that there was to know.
Well, and you have the greater prominence of neurodivergency because we actually have better screening and symptoms guidelines and whatnot. And so a lot of kids that, you know, like, I guarantee you, both me and my brother, neurodivergent. Like, I know I am pretty sure about my brother, but I don't know. But you know, we definitely struggled a bit. Like, I remember I was in charge of keeping him quiet and still while mom and dad were up at the front of church, doing their thing at the churches. And that was the bane of my childhood. I absolutely hated it because, of course, he didn't want to listen to his older sister. You're not my mom. And it was so frustrating to get parentified at like 5. But, you know,
And half their ministry and financial success is going to depend on having their children in line, quote unquote.
We had to be on our best behavior. Like, I remember showing up, you could tell whenever we were actually at an IFB church because we had to hide the contemporary Christian music cassettes that were in our car. We had to make sure that my sister and I were never seen in pants. We had to be like extra good, and it was nice when we would go back to our home church and we could relax a little bit. But there's just, you're expected to be this perfectly developed adults at age 2. And then they're like, well, he's throwing a tantrum. That's sinful. That's rebellious. That's manipulative. And there's no accounting for actual child development. I think that, at least in my family, I think we fared better because my mom had early childhood education in college. And so I feel kind of lucky in that sense because I know that a lot of the other missionary kids that I knew, that was not the case for them.
Yeah, I mean, very few moms in ATI had any kind of child education or developmental, like any type of education for homeschooling, for raising, you know, like beyond just normal parenting, right? Like normal parenting is hard, but we're talking like early childhood education type stuff.
And not only that, like, okay, you might have some people that are equipped to be parents,
Mm-hmm.
you know, how, you know, your 2.5 kids, whatever. But when you're talking about like, okay, having 8 kids, 10 kids, having to homeschool all of them, like that's expected of like every person,
Mm-hmm.
every mother, woman at ATI, and it's just like, you know, not everybody can do that or should
and
even
at different
do that
grade levels.
at
So like
all.
even if you had early childhood development, like you're homeschooling 8, 10, 12 different grade levels at once, like there is no way you can give enough individualized attention to that. Kids would fall through the cracks if you had learning disabilities
Mm-hmm.
or any neurodivergency. Like, I mean, a lot of these families don't even do well visits.
No.
So you're not going to get screening at your well visits. You're not going to get professional intervention for any kind of delays or, you know, even speech delay is not going to be something that they're going to address professionally. And then, you know, good luck, like being neurodivergent or having an intellectual disability or anything like that and trying to educate yourself in the middle of a circus of other siblings. Like none of these unless you grew up in a small family, which had its other issues, unless you grew up in a small family, like these houses are loud. They're so loud. And small families either meant that there was fertility problems or that there was sin because you hadn't trusted God with the size of your family. So
committed the sin of using birth control earlier in your life or something.
Exactly. And that's why people would have reversal surgeries and all that kind of stuff. So
the hedge prayer. So praying a hedge around someone to protect them from satanic influence, to pull them back from satanic influence. He, of course, gives a story in the book about a minister whose wife ran out on him to go shack up with a club owner. And the husband prayed the hedge prayer, and then within 3 days, she came back to the house because she had lost favor with her lovers, and her new boyfriend had kicked her out because the customers at his club didn't want to be there because she was there. And it was this very weird witchy vibe.
It's even more biblical because it was 3 days, and 3 is a biblical number. Because Gothard's the whole numerology thing.
The numerology thing is wild because that was, at least in the 80s, beginning of the 90s, heavily preached against in my churches because it was the new age coming in, and so enneagrams and all that stuff. Now, the only numerology that was allowed was the number 7 is holy, 666 is the devil, and I feel like there was one other number. The 144,000.
Oh, yeah.
And isn't 777 one as well?
No, that's the lucky number for the lottery. Or slot machines.
Yeah, it's on a slot machine for sure.
Like my family and a lot of the people in our region had like multiple numerology books because it was such a big thing. But yeah, the hedge of protection prayer, like that's wild. And like you could pray it for another person, you could pray it for your family, but you could also, like, it was encouraged if you bought a new home or new piece of property that you would walk the perimeter of the property or go through each room of the house and pray this hedge prayer, this prayer of protection, that you would cast out the demons that might still be there from previous occupants or whatever sinful acts that they had done. And yeah, or like you get a new car, you pray hedge protection, you walk the car.
I think like literally for every prayer, we have morning prayers. Every single person that we prayed for ended up getting a hedge of protection around them. Like it was just something that was automatically added in.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like there's the phrase that gets thrown around in Christianity in general, and then there was a very specific like hedge of protection prayer stuff that was added to ATI.
So I have the exact prayer here. Heavenly Father, as the spiritual leader in my family, I purpose to resist the devil in my own life. I ask you in the name and through the blood of the Lord Jesus Christ to bind Satan in the lives of my family. Build around their minds, wills, and emotions a wall of protection. So we've got minds, wills, and emotions. So behavior control, thought control, emotion control.
If you had asked me 15 years ago if any of these people would have supported Trump, I would have said, absolutely not. Like, Trump was way too vulgar for any of these families. But Trump promised to build a wall and build that hedge of protection around America and a few other things. And so all of a sudden, he's fine because he's a hedger.
So my same parents who were apoplectic about President Clinton getting a blowjob, right? Like, that was just beyond unseemly. Kick him out of office, put George Bush in, or bring back Reagan. Like this is unacceptable. We cannot have this kind of moral failures in our
in
government.
The highest office of the land.
And yet these same people, 25 years later, the guy that is grabbing by the P word and...
Oh, but don't you know that, like, big media just set him up? They fabricated
that whole
recording.
He's actually a baby Christian.
It was a deep fake.
He's actually super strong now because he walked across the street with the Bible. Yeah, he's a hedge of protection person, so they like him.
And I don't think, and I think that moment, where that was like the defining moment for a lot of people who are deconstructing, and like they like fundies don't understand that, they don't get it, like they're unable to see the irony in that or whatever.
Exactly. They are so laser fixed on what they want to see that there is zero self-awareness. None whatsoever. I wanted to add a bit of an addendum to that. So, we're talking about the self-awareness and the laser focus on something that you specifically want to see. And that is a criticism that we receive from the other side as well. And so I can appreciate that some folks watching this might want to both sides this issue, and I think that's fair. There are some people on the left, I don't want to name names, but I can think of several, where they are so laser focused on proving their point that they don't recognize the stumbles that are being made by those who are progressive. So while I don't want to completely both sides this issue, because I think there is a nuance and a scale and a difference in the oversights that are made by one camp versus the other, but I also appreciate that I have internal biases about that. So we all have our opinions, and those are based on our experiences and our influences, and so we are valid in the feelings that we have about our experiences. We need to acknowledge and honor the emotional journey that we have been on. We need to do that as a person from any background. That is something that is important, to understand where you come from and why you feel the way that you feel, and focusing on that kind of thing and the why behind the what. A lot of that is the self-awareness that we want to see in people. And in finding out why you feel that way, you should also see things that challenge the way that you feel that way. And that is something that I know some conservatives do, and I know that some of them are completely convinced of the sources that they have and the information that they are basing their decisions on. I also know that a lot are basing it on cultural politics and identity politics without really having a concrete understanding of the biases and the prejudices that brought them to the place that they are at. It has been that way for so long. Those prejudices and biases have been built into the structures of our society for so long that it feels like, well, this is how it's supposed to be. This is how it's always been. Why is there suddenly a problem? And being stuck in that mindset of traditionalism and doing things the way that we've been doing them because we've always done them that way, and surely that must be the right way to do them. But as I've shown in a lot of my history videos, that's not always the way that it has been done. We have just had such a homogenized view of history that has been pumped to us that we don't understand the varied influences that got us to one place or another. We only see the end. I forget who said this quote, but somebody said that history is written by the victors. And you look at like ancient Scottish history, when you're talking about the Picts and the Vikings and whatnot, that history is all written by the Roman invaders. They destroyed all of the indigenous, not literature, but the indigenous communications of who they were and what they believed. So it can be very difficult to get the primary sources for beliefs of a particular indigenous area because a conqueror came through and the victor is the one who wrote the history. So I just want to give, if anyone who disagrees with us is still watching at this point, I want to let you know that I encourage you to be curious, and you can still come to the conclusions that you have right now. I just want to offer an alternate perspective. It isn't something that I expect to change the world. I just don't want to contribute to a homogenized continuation of history. I want to make sure that people know that there is a variety and a diaspora. It's not just the story told by the victors.